What's going on, everybody? Here we are on a Monday, starting off another work week. One day at a time, we can do this. Just one step in front of the other. I've had a lot of fun over the last couple of weeks. I've done a lot of collaborations. Literally in the last 2 weeks, I had my buddy Josh from Rated Rookie on. Hopefully you watched that on Saturday. I've done some collaborations. Did one with Theo, Clemente Collector, Darren, Return to Collecting, and my pal Mookie Chilson. I've had a few. You guys know. I've been doing more collaborations. I was on with Turn Back the Clock the other day with Dylan and Adam, Splendid Sports, Double D, Vintage Cards, and what I am realizing, finally, what I'm realizing is how much more fun I have when I do collaborative videos. And, if you go back a year, because that was my goal this year, is to do more collaborations. Because historically, for the first year of my channel, over a year, I didn't do a lot of that. And my whole goal this year was collaborate a lot more. And I feel like I have. And I think you guys have noticed that. And it's been really, really fun. Now, I can't collaborate with everyone. That would be impossible. But a way for us to collaborate, a way for us to share ideas without being on a live stream or a recorded stream is to share opinions in a written format. And then I can kind of talk about them. It's like when I was growing up, my dad and I would be driving all over to my games and to my practices and to card shows. And we always had talk radio on. And the fun about talk radio is you can be a listener, but you can be a participant. You don't have to be on the show to be a part of the show. And that's what I love so much about these Monday videos and the Wednesday videos that I do, is anybody can be a participant. So if you're listening to what I'm talking about today and you think I'm crazy, maybe I am. And you can share that voice. And I'm happy to share that for you by leaving a comment and sharing your thoughts. And so last week, I asked this question of, what do you guys think? Are you influenced in what you collect based on what other people like? So do you go, the 52 set is a really popular one, so it kind of makes sense for me to collect cards from the 52 set? Or, I know that a lot of people are doing Hall of Famers from the 1960s, so I'm going to start collecting Hall of Famers because that's really popular. Or do you just say, no, I'm going to collect the guy that aren't a lot of people collecting because I like that guy? Or is there some sort of combination? And there are definitely pros and cons to just only collecting what you like versus the complete opposite of only collecting what other people like. So is there a right answer? Of course not. Of course there's not a right answer. There is not a black and a white. Everything is gray. It's just the level of where you fall on that spectrum. And so I thought it'd be fun to get everybody's feedback and then share some of the highlights. Were there people who said, yes, I'm influenced by what others think and what others collect? Absolutely. I'm about to share some. And then there were people that said, not at all. I could not care less what anybody else collects. I collect what I like. And if nobody else likes it, that's fine. Where do I fall? I think I fall somewhere in the middle. I certainly collect some things that not a lot of people collect. The three guys that I PC are Matt Manning, who there aren't a lot of Matt Manning collectors, but he's a former student and a friend of mine. So yeah, I want his cards. Greg Nettles, my namesake, and there aren't a ton of Greg Nettles collectors. Now there are people who like Greg Nettles and there are people who are Yankee collectors and they might pick up Greg Nettles cards, but there aren't a lot of people who have as many Greg Nettles cards as they can find like I do. And then a very polarizing player in Roger Clemens. Those are my three PC players. Now, I also collect a lot of other stuff, some of which is liked by others and some of which is not. The T206 set is a fairly recognizable and appealing set for some and for many. And I've been working on a Hall of Famer run from that set. And then I collect pirate cards from the 1880s, Allen and Ginter. And I know that there aren't a ton of people beating down the door to pick those up. So I definitely think I kind of collect in a variety of ways. So how do you all collect? Well, let's take a look at some of your responses, starting with some people that said, you know what? Yeah, I think I am influenced by what other people think and what other people collect. Let's hear what some of them had to say. For your question, I do feel like the influence of others affects my card choices. Some of this is from seeing popular cards repeatedly over time, piquing my interest as well, and often for good reason. Maybe the most popular cards, including some of the Hall of Fame rookies, are awesome cards. I do think you have to find your own path as a collector and collect what you like, as I hear so many others say. If we all wanted the same cards, the bidding wars would be nuts, and the unwanted cards would be worthless. I had my eyes on a 57 Frank Robinson, an iconic golden era rookie card, but instead I recently picked up a 59 at a fraction of the cost. I'm really happy adding what I feel is one of the coolest cards from the 1959 set to my collection. The rookie will still be around if I decide I want one later. Everyone is influenced by others, evidenced by the higher prices paid for plentiful rookie cards. So this week's question is interesting to think about. I wanted to answer that other collectors' opinions have no influence on my collecting, but that would be untrue. Now, I will say that I collect because I love cards, and I'd never buy anything I didn't like because others thought it was cool. That said, I think a lot of collectors have a competitive streak, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being extra excited about grabbing cards that everyone acknowledges are big additions to a collection. I don't take the competitive side of the hobby too seriously. That is, I'm always thrilled for my hobby friends when they pick up big cards, and I don't spend outside my budget to keep pace with high-end collectors. But if I'm being honest, I get pretty dang excited when I pick up a big card, and I get to show it off to other collectors on Instagram when it comes in the mail. Now, as you can imagine, as always, I certainly have some opinions on this topic, and I think that there are some good points there. Now, one of the things that was mentioned, that middle comment, it was a shorter one, and it essentially said, well, we're all influenced by what other people are want and purchase because it affects the prices. Because if something is popular, then the price goes up. Well, there's no doubt that we're all certainly affected by what's popular. But if we're influenced by it to want it, that may or may not be because others like it. For example, the Ernie Banks rookie card that I love so much, it's a beautiful card. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful image. It's red, white, and blue. It's a young Ernie Banks who's a likable guy. If that was an awful photo, I don't know if that card would be as valuable as it is. But because he's such a likable person, and he was a great player, and it's beautiful in the image itself, that's part of what drives the demand, I believe, for the card. There are other cards that some people just don't like. Now, there are a lot of people that, for whatever reason, don't like a lot of the black and white sets. For example, the 48 Bowman set. It's got some great cards. It's got a Yogi Berra rookie. It's got a Stan Musial rookie. But some people don't like it because it's black and white. Similar to the 39 and 40 play ball sets. Those are also black and white. So in a lot of cases, the 41 play ball is more popular than the 39 or the 40 because it's got color instead of simply being black and white. Now, for me, that doesn't bother me. I don't mind the black and white. And to a certain extent, it kind of dates the card, which has a bit of an appeal for me. But certainly, some people are affected. Now, are they affected because others are affected? Do they say, I don't want the 48 Bowman because that's not a popular set. I'll go to the 50 Bowman and 51 Bowman, that are the full color because everybody else likes them. See, it does kind of matter whether you're the only person that likes something. And the reason it matters, I guess the only time it matters, it really ultimately matters, is when you go to sell. If you are going to die with the cards and then nobody is ever going to try to sell the cards, they're just going to be relics, they're just going to be heirlooms, then yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter if you're the only person on earth that likes something. But like real estate, like most cars, like a lot of items, they're eventually going to be resold unless it's a disposable item. And so if it's an item that's going to be resold, at some point you have to kind of think about it. I mean, let's just think about cars for a second. One of the reasons that Camrys and Accords are so popular is not just because they last a long time, but because they're kind of widely accepted as reliable cars for long term. So the resale value is more. So people are more saying, oh, what should I get? What sedan should I buy? They might lean toward a Camry or an Accord because they know when the time comes that they're going to sell it, it'll be pretty easy to sell. Not every sedan is as easy to sell when it's time to sell. So that is certainly part of it, that resale value. And that's the thing with cards. If a card is popular, it's going to be a liquid card, meaning it's going to be easy to sell and get your money out of. So, there are only so many people that can buy really expensive cards, right? There are some cards that once you hit a fourth or especially a fifth figure, it eliminates a lot of us from the potential buyers. So those become a little bit less liquid. The multi-million-dollar house might take longer to sell because there are a lot fewer people who are able to purchase it. And when we're talking about cards, if it's a Mickey Mantle card, I was just listening the other day to a video from my buddy Dylan Double D Vintage Baseball Cards talk about how Mickey Mantle is the easiest card to sell because he's like the hobby hero. And he's right. So is it risky to buy a Mickey Mantle card from the 1950s? It's not really that risky because if you decide, I don't want it, you can sell it. It goes back to when the story I told it like a year ago about buying a used boat. I bought a used boat. I was like, this would be fun for my family to use. It's like $4,500 for a used boat. A nice little, V8, family boat with an open bow. So I bought it because my thought was, this is a good deal. And if I decide I don't want it, I'll be able to get $4,500 out of it. I'll be able to get my money back. So there's not really any risk. I guess unless it catches on fire, which it didn't. So we used the boat for 2-3 years. And then after 2-3 years, I decided to sell it and ended up selling it for more than I bought it for. It wasn't risky because the depreciation was out of it. One of the things I tell my students all the time is one of my strongest recommendations for them for life is to be taking their money and putting it into things that go up in value, not things that go down in value. What are things that go down in value? Things like going out to eat, right? Going to the movies, clothes. Those things depreciate in value very, very rapidly. But the things that appreciate in value are things like the stock market, the housing market, gold, collectible items with a strong foundation of collector base. Those things aren't that risky because they're not likely to plummet in value unless you're buying Kevin Durant rookie cards in 2021. So because of that, I think that it does matter if it's a popular card or a card that other people are interested in, if you're thinking about selling, because the more popular the card, the easier it's going to be to liquidate at some point. That's something that at least is part of the equation for most of us. Not all of us, but most of us. At least for a chunk of our collection. Now, if you want to have a little side project of pirate cards and Greg Nettles cards, that's different than only collecting those things. And even if it is only a collect, it's not like that's wrong. It just is a less liquid collection than a collection of somebody who only buys Mickey Mantles. Now, the next group of responses I'm going to share are people who were kind of somewhere in between. It was kind of, yes, I'm influenced, but no, I'm not influenced. Or, yes, I'm influenced, and yes, I'm influenced. Or, anyway, let's take a look and hear what some of them had to say. To answer this week's question, I like owning iconic cards, and I suppose to be iconic, they have to garner their fair share of interest from other collectors. So, based on that, I guess, perhaps, most of us are influenced by others in the hobby. On the other hand, there are a lot of cards in my collection that most people would find unimpressive, but I am still ecstatic to own them. Regarding next week's question, interest from others in the card community does not impact what I choose to collect. I collect only what I like in terms of aesthetics and various players and sets. But, to play devil's advocate, I do perk up when someone else brings to light a card or player that I was previously unaware of. I recently bought a 33 Gaudy Dolph Luque based on one of Orlando's recent videos. I didn't know much about Luque, or Orlando's video enlightened me. Same thing for a video he recently did on Armando Marsans. Congrats on obtaining your Crackerjack, Walsh, and Marsans, by the way. So while I don't copy or emulate anyone in the hobby, I do take interest in cards and memorabilia that I was previously unaware of. I believe most of us do this, although many won't admit it. Learning from others is just one of the great ways we discover what's out there. It's not all books, catalogs, and internet searches. Grade, pop, and price are correlated for me. I collect 90s, so usually looking between PSA 8 through 10. If a PSA 10 is 5 times the cost of a PSA 8, I want the best looking PSA 8, typically where the front has no noticeable flaws. Unless the PSA 9 has a high pop count, then I'd look for a 9. If there is a small difference in price between an 8 and a 10, I'd look at the 10. I'm interested to see where the conversation goes next week because I think you already summed it up nicely. If I'm spending less than $100, and usually under $50, I don't care what other people think. Beyond that, it is a sliding scale. If I'm spending $2,000, it needs to be a widely popular card because it becomes an investment. So, yeah, some of us are like, well, no, I'm not influenced, but yes, I guess I kind of am influenced. Or vice versa. You know, a perfect example to show how we can be influenced and our opinions can change is as easy as looking toward autographed cards. I mean, a lot of us that have been around collecting for a long time know that for years and years and years, if you wanted an autograph, you'd get it on a ball or you'd get it on a photo. And the reason that autographed cards of vintage players, vintage playing day cards of deceased players is so rare is because it was a cardinal sin to commit if you were in the community of collecting cards. You just didn't do that. And a lot of the old school guys, I've seen them, and I know you guys have too. They say, no, I don't buy cards that are autographed. Like, that's not my thing. Like, that's partly because they're still in that same belief. But that has certainly changed. Why did that change? Well, we can go in a whole lot of different reasons as to why that changed, but it has changed. Collecting those cards has become very popular, and because it wasn't popular, the population of a lot of them is pretty low. So what does that mean? Where does that leave us? It leaves us that if we are influenced and it changes us into going into a different direction, what it ultimately could do is dramatically change the market and make the market white hot when before it was just dusty and old. And autographed plain days cards of vintage players is a perfect place to look. Now, more of the points that were mentioned in there, and there were some great points in there, is like, well, I like iconic cards, but I'm not influenced by others. And it's like, but I guess if I like iconic cards, I am influenced by others, because the reason a card is iconic is because it is popular. So I am influenced because I like those popular cards, which should become iconic cards. Completely. 100%. I think that's where we all kind of walk this line. Again, I don't think that it's either you're not influenced at all or completely influenced. We're all somewhere in the middle. It's just how far on the spectrum do we go? Some of us collect 99% based on our own eyeballs and what brings us joy. But I think almost everybody has whether they admit it or not, I don't know, has a little bit of a whisper in their ear about, are you sure you want to pay $10,000 for this? Because I don't know if anybody else would ever want it. Who knows? Who knows? Again, there's not a right or a wrong answer, but it's an interesting thing to kick around. Now, of the three types of responses, yes, I'm influenced, no, I'm not influenced, or I'm kind of influenced, but not really, by far the most popular was the response of, I'm not influenced. Now, I think that we all would like to think about ourselves that we're independent thinkers, that we're not easily influenced, and what other people like is what other people like. I kind of have in my own mind, I like to be kind of a counter, a little bit of the opposite of what the group is. I mean, in the 1980s and 90s, when Michael Jordan and the Bulls were the most popular team, and I'd go to school and every kid had Bulls stuff on and Jordan shoes on, I refused. I instead rooted against the Bulls. And I would not buy the Jordans because that was what the in thing was. So I took the opposite approach of going in the opposite direction. I've had people ask me about my channel. Well, why do you do this and this instead of, a lot of channels do that and that. Why don't you do that and that? And I'm like, because other people are doing it. I want to do something that is different, that is interesting. I don't want to why would I copy what someone else is doing? Because what someone else is doing is already being done. Anyway, so let's take a look at the popular response, the most popular response, which was, nope, I'm not influenced. I do my own thing. I buy what I like and what I like only. Let's check some of those out. None at all, could care less. But I do enjoy what other collectors are collecting or show on their channels because it is about collecting. You yourself collect Greg Nettles, Roger Clemens, pirate cards. It's cool to see your enjoyment of those cards. But for me, it's about what brings me joy. I collect Bobby Mercer cards because as a Yankees fan growing up, he was the next Mickey Mantle and enjoyed and loved watching him play, even though he fell short of that. He had a good career, but not like a Hall of Famer. But followed his career even after he was traded. I watch other videos of Phillies collectors as he does mail days or pickup videos. Don't care for the Phillies, but I always seem to learn something from watching his channel. As everyone says, collect what you like. That is so true. Love your show. As for next week's question, I collect what I like. I'm never influenced by anyone's collection. I'll enjoy others' collection, but they have zero influence on my buying and purchasing. I always hear Chris from Missouri in my head at all times. Collect what you like, period. My friend Tony says, great video, Greg. The different answers you got showcases how many different ways you can collect. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder is a phrase that definitely rings true in card collecting. My personal answer to the question you posed this week is the following. I collect what I like. I'm not collecting with an eye to what someone might say about whatever I own. A lot of my purchases parallel what book I'm reading about what player at that time. I read Glory of Their Times and found myself wanting to buy some of those old timers cards, Joe Wood and Sam Crawford. I read the Learson book about Ty Cobb and found myself wanting his cards. I got very interested in Shoeless Joe and the Black Sox scandal. I have devoured books and podcasts about that subject. So, naturally, I have picked up Joe Jackson, Chick Gandil, and Eddie Chakotay. I'm going to try and get the 7 Black Sox 1919 W514 strip cards. I currently have 2. And lastly, as the Topps Hall of Fame player-run collector, I really don't care about what other people think about my cards. I enjoy looking and completing a player run. But I totally enjoy watching YouTube collectors' collections, even though I may not want those other cards. I appreciate watching someone pick up cards like the T206 sets or the 33, 34 Gaudis, etc. Lately, I have branched out into Pro Football Hall of Fame rookie cards. Thanks to you. Enjoy the channel. Greg from Ohio. All right, so some strong statements in there. No, never. Never am I affected by what anybody else thinks. I collect what I like. I go with Chris from Missouri's statement of, it's just a hobby, collect what you like. And I love Chris. And Chris does do that. He does tend to collect what he likes, but isn't it kind of easy? I mean, and I'll use Chris for an example. And I love Chris. Chris is a good friend of mine. He does say collect what you like. And one of the things that's important to Chris is he just likes to have the card. He likes to have an example of the card. And the grade isn't really that big a deal to him. So I've seen him trade down from a 5 to a 2 of a card and then free up money to buy other cards that he doesn't have. But the cards that he tends to collect are Hall of Famer runs. And Hall of Famers are kind of popular. And so it comes down to, is it the chicken or the egg thing? Is Chris not collecting things that he likes and he's just collecting Hall of Famers because they're likable? No, I don't think it's that. I think Chris likes the great players in baseball and he likes having a lot of their cards. But what if what Chris liked were commons from the late 1970s? 76, 77, 78 commons were his thing. And he just loved them. He just loved them. Would you want to collect what you like? Now, I know that that's an extreme example. And I like the comment in here about Bobby Mercer. And, I'm a Bobby Mercer collector because, when Bobby Mercer was coming up, he was supposed to be the next Mantle. The Yankees had this run of outfielders and Hall of Famers and players. And the guy that was supposed to be coming in as Mantle was coming out was supposed to be Bobby Mercer. And he was a good player, but he didn't pan out to be the next Mantle. We all know that. And he said, but I like Bobby Mercer and I like Bobby Mercer cards. And that's fair. But Bobby Mercer is also a lot more popular than some other players. It's not like he's an unknown guy. He played a decent amount of his career for, probably the most famous franchise in sports, possibly. So he at least is always going to have some demand because of that. Now, I'm not saying that these people who are claiming that they don't have any influence from outside people are wrong. I believe you. I believe that you're not influenced. But the question that I have is, if I like Mickey Mantle cards and I collect Mickey Mantle cards, and then I say I'm not worried about what anybody else thinks about what I collect, well, that's easier when you collect Mickey Mantle because people do like what you collect. You may not be worried about it. You may not think that you care whether it's popular or not, but that's convenient when it is popular. If you collect 33 Gaudi, high grade 33 Gaudis, because that's what you love, well, good news. High grade 33 Gaudis are pretty popular. It's a really popular set. So that worked out well for you. I mean, how many people are really into collecting, KB Toys cards from the late 1980s? Well, why not? Why aren't there a bunch of KB Toys card collectors out there? So it's certainly possible that people just collect mantles because they love Mantle, not because Mantle's popular. And that makes sense. But again, when you say you don't care what other people think, but what you collect is popular, then it does eliminate the risk. What it really boils down to, for me, is when you're collecting things that very few people like, it's risky. It's riskier to collect that. Because if there's only 4 or 5 people that collect it, and then those 4 or 5 people go away or stop collecting it, then there's no market for what you have. And so recouping your money, should you decide you don't want it anymore. Now, anything can happen. Maybe somebody gets sick. Maybe they have medical bills. Maybe something happens with the family and they need to liquidate some of their assets. It is nice to have your collection be an asset that if you needed to pull from, you could. I mean, back to Chris from Missouri, he talked about he used some of his cards to pay for his wife's engagement ring. He used some of his collection to buy a ring and get married to his wife. I mean, that's pretty cool. It's kind of nice that you can fall back on it. Now, that's great for Chris because Chris was collecting things that were popular, that he could liquidate them to get the money for those that ring. He could sell those cards because he collected Hall of Famers and important players and all-time greats. But if he was collecting a set that is not very widely known, players, just the team players from the Kansas City Royals during, the early 1980s or something, like if those didn't have a ton of value, he wouldn't have been able to liquidate them. So for me, I think, I don't know, but I think that a lot of us want to be collecting things that we think have lasting value. And one of the reasons I think that, and I've said this before, is if you thought what you were buying was going to go down in value, why would you buy it today? Why wouldn't you buy it in 6 months? If it's going to go down in value, if you're convinced it's going down in value, then you should just wait to buy it because it's going to go down. But a lot of us buy what we're buying now because we think at some point it will be unaffordable. When you make your priority list. So before I go to the National, I go, what do I want to buy most? Well, I think I might want to buy a T206 Ty Cobb. Why do I want that card right now? Well, because I think it's possible that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I won't be able to afford it anymore. So I think the cards that are kind of at the top of our list for a lot of us, why? If there are 100 cards that I want, why am I buying that one right now? For a lot of us, we're buying that one right now because we think that one is the most likely to become unaffordable the soonest, isn't it? I mean, think back. My buddy Billy Ballgame, he bought a 54 Hank Aaron, beautifully centered card at the National. And he had several cards on his list. I think one of the reasons that card was toward the top of his list is because he thinks, man, if I don't get that soon, that card could get to the point where it's just never going to be affordable for me. And so it moves up the list. So when you have this pecking order, when you have this list, when you have 50 cards that you're targeting, when you go, what are the 10 cards I want this year? Are you just put up 100 cards that you want, just throw darts at it and hope whatever ones it hits you're going to go with? No, I don't think that's what we do. I think what we do naturally, a lot of us, and I know I'm making an assumption, but I think subconsciously at least, a lot of us are going, the card that I think I want next is that one. It's not because suddenly you're in love with the card. For a lot of us, it's because we see that one as the most likely or one of the most likely to go up in value, so I better buy it now. Isn't it? And if the card is completely unpopular, then it's not really a card that you need to worry about buying soon, because it'll still be there in 2 or 3 years. I really think that we all care about what's popular because what it does is it really determines when we go for that card. And I think that most of us decide to buy a card sooner that we think is going to go up. At the National, my dad, kind of was like, man, I'd really like to get a 53 Mantle, but it's an expensive card. I don't know if I want to spend that much on a card. And he ended up getting one. And I think one of the reasons he ended up getting one is because he knows if he waits too much longer, that card might get to the point where it's just too expensive. And in that regard, I think that even those of us who aren't as easily influenced, we tend to be at least thinking about what's popular, because at the very least what it might do is affect when we buy it. I don't know. I mean, it's the whole FOMO. It's the fear of missing out. If I don't get it now, I may never get it. Right? Is that what is people that are buying Shohei rookies right now? If I don't buy it now, it might get to the point where it's unaffordable, so I better buy it now. So if he gets hot, I better buy it now, because if I don't buy it now, it's going to get so expensive I'll never be able to buy it. So it moves up on our list, on our targets of when we're going to get it. Isn't that being influenced by what others are doing? And I don't know. I'm sure I'm making a lot of statements in here, but there's really, if I were writing a lot of this, there would be question marks at the end of this. It's like, right? Like, don't you think? No? Yes? Maybe? Anyway, those of you that responded, thank you. I didn't include every comment. I tried to pick, 3 or 4 from each kind of category. Now, speaking of categories, this coming week's question I think is a good one, and I'm not going to claim to take credit for it. I had somebody reach out to me, somebody who watches the channel from time to time, sent me an email and asked me, hey, do you take any suggestions for questions for topics? And I'm like, sure. So let me read you the question and the topic that he asked that I am going to pose to all of you. Greg, I'm curious as to how others in the community collect. If you ever consider taking viewer, dedicated lurker questions to use as a question to the viewers, I would love to know how many of us are slab-gnostic and don't care which grader slab the card is versus how many only collect one type of slab. whether it be PSA, SGC, Beckett, etc. Thanks, Trevor. So I think that's a really interesting question. So that's the question for you this week. Are you a PSA only person? If so, why? Are you an SGC only person? If so, why? Are you an only Beckett person? If so, why? Are you ungraded, raw cards only? If so, why? Or do you not care? You'll collect any slab, slabbed or not, any grade, raw, or are you raw only? There's so many different styles. The key thing that I'm curious about here is why. If you're PSA only, why is that? That's okay, but why? If you're SGC only, why? If you're ungraded only, why? I will share your thoughts next week. I look forward to reading over these comments. Please don't hesitate to share your thoughts and your comments on this topic because I think it's a really interesting one. That said, thanks to everyone again who submitted a comment, and I look forward to reading these ones next week.